The phone vibrated softly against the polished mahogany table once, then again. I was in the middle of explaining paint finishes to a client whose contract alone was worth more than my husband earned in 3 years. I almost ignored it. Almost. But when I glanced down, the first alert was from the bank, $68,000 withdrawn. The second was a text from Jason, heading to Dubai with Kayla. Thanks for the startup capital, don't wait up. Ha ha. That little haha sat on my screen like a match dropped into gasoline. I didn't gasp. I didn't drop my phone. I didn't even change my expression. Instead, I looked up at my client and offered the same calm, professional smile I'd practiced for years. Forgive me, I said gently. I need a brief moment to handle a logistics issue. She nodded, barely glancing up from the fabric swatches spread across the table. To her, it probably sounded like a delivery problem. Maybe a contractor delay. Something ordinary. I stood, walked across the showroom floor, and slipped into the powder room. The door clicked shut behind me. Only then did I pull my phone out again and stare at the screen. Negative $68,000. And that message from Jason still sitting there, glowing smugly back at me. Heading to Dubai with Kayla. Thanks for the startup capital. Don't wait up. Haha. That last word lingered in my mind. Haha. 2 syllables. 12 years of marriage reduced to a punchline. I waited for the emotional avalanche everyone expects in moments like this. The shaking hands, the tears, the hollow feeling in your chest. But none of it came. Instead, something else settled over me. Stillness. I leaned against the porcelain sink and opened the banking app again, my thumb steady against the screen. My heart rate hadn't spiked. If anything, it had slowed down. This is what panic looks like when you've trained yourself not to show it. It doesn't look like chaos. It looks like clarity. I pulled up the transaction details. Jason had transferred the entire renovation fund. $68,000 I had spent 24 months building money, meant for the contractors starting work on my second studio next week. He knew exactly what that money was for, which meant this wasn't just betrayal, it was sabotage. But then I saw something that made me pause. The transfer type? Standard ACH. I almost laughed. See, a wire transfer moves instantly. One click, and the money disappears forever. But a standard transfer, that takes time. Processing time, clearing time. In other words, the money was in limbo. Gone from my available balance, yes, but not yet in his account. Jason had been so eager to sprint toward his Dubai fantasy that he'd clicked the wrong button, which meant the clock hadn't run out yet. I tapped another number and held the phone to my ear. The fraud department picked up after 2 rings. Bank security, how may I assist you? My voice, when I spoke, sounded calm, measured. The same tone I used when negotiating supplier contracts. This is Eleanor Vance, I said. I'm looking at a transfer of $68,000 initiated from a device I do not recognize. I did not authorize this transaction. There was a brief pause on the other end. Understood, Mrs. Vance. We can flag the transfer and place a hold while we open an investigation. Do it, I replied. More typing. Then the agent asked, would you also like us to revoke access for the secondary cardholder associated with the account, Jason? For a moment, I imagined him at the airport, smug, confident, probably ordering champagne while he waited for his flight. Yes, I said calmly. Revoke it immediately. Another pause, more typing. All right, the agent confirmed. The account is now restricted and the secondary cardholder has been removed. I thanked her, ended the call, and set the phone down on the edge of the sink. Step 1 was done. Jason thought he had just robbed me. What he didn't realize yet was that the game had already started. The fraud hold bought me time, but time alone wasn't enough. Because I knew Jason, stopping the transfer wouldn't scare him, not yet. In his mind, that $68,000 was just the appetizer. The real safety net was something else entirely. The house. More specifically, the home equity line of credit we'd opened the year before. During the refinance. $200,000 sitting there, waiting to be borrowed against the value of the property. Jason loved that credit line. He talked about it the way gamblers talk about their last stack of chips. A cushion, a fallback, his personal piggy bank. In his version of the future, he'd land in Dubai, charm a few investors, maybe stay in a 5-star suite while he worked the room. And if things got tight, he'd swipe the HELOC card, dinner at the Burj, luxury car rental, a month of pretending to be a man with limitless capital. The problem with Jason's plan was that he had forgotten something very simple. I was the one who handled the refinance, which meant I was also the primary administrator on the mortgage account. I picked up my phone again and switched apps. The lender's portal loaded in seconds. There it was. Available credit $200,000. For a moment, I pictured him right then, probably already in a taxi to the airport. Maybe texting Kayla about penthouse views and rooftop cocktails, spending money he believed was waiting for him. My thumb hovered over the screen. Closing the account entirely would trigger paperwork. Signatures, notifications. Too slow. But there was another option. I tapped Manage Limit. A small box appeared, asking for the new withdrawal limit. I didn't rush. My breathing stayed slow, steady. Then I typed a single number. For a moment, the screen asked me to confirm. I did. The page refreshed. Available credit $0. Just like that, his platinum parachute had turned into a lead weight. Jason was about to land in one of the most expensive cities on earth, with a frozen bank account, canceled cards, and a credit line that wouldn't buy him a bottle of water. I set the phone down and turned on the faucet, letting cold water run over my wrists. 10 seconds, a trick I'd learned years ago to reset the nervous system. When I finally looked back at the mirror, the woman staring at me didn't look shocked. She looked composed, almost surgical. Jason thought he had just blown up my life. What he didn't realize yet was that the demolition charges had just gone off under his. People always ask me later how I stayed so calm that day. How a woman can read a text like that. Dubai Kayla, thanks for the startup capital and not collapse in the middle of a client meeting. They assume I was numb. They assume I was in shock. But the truth is, that moment didn't start the story. It ended it. Because my marriage didn't die in a powder room with $68,000 missing from the bank. It died 182 days earlier, a Tuesday night in November. I remember it clearly because it was supposed to be the best night of my career. I was standing on a stage under blinding white lights, holding a heavy crystal trophy, the Regional Designer of the Year award. The room was full industry people, clients, journalists, colleagues, and somewhere out there in the first row was a seat reserved for Jason. I kept glancing toward it while the applause faded, waiting to see his face. The seat stayed empty. 10 minutes earlier, he had texted me, "Stuck in a client crisis, so proud of you, babe. Go get him." At the time, I believed him. Of course I did. That's what marriage trains you to do. You believe the explanations because believing them keeps the structure standing. I sat down at the table after the ceremony, the trophy still cool in my hands, smiling politely, while people congratulated me. Then the room settled. Conversations drifted away. And out of habit, more than suspicion, I opened Instagram. Not his page. Hers, Kayla, the receptionist from Jason's gym. she posted constantly. Selfies, smoothie bowls, inspirational quotes about hustle culture. I had glanced at her profile before without thinking much of it, but that night, there was a new post. A boomerang video. 2 margarita glasses clinking together in a dim dive bar across town. The caption read, "Work hard, play hard." At first it didn't mean anything. Then I noticed the sleeve. Just a quick flash in the corner of the frame. Dark navy wool, thin pinstripes. I knew that jacket. I'd bought it for Jason on his birthday. Suddenly, the room around me felt strangely quiet. I watched the little video loop again and again. Clink. Laughter in the background. Clink. The jacket sleeve tilting into frame. That was the moment people expect tears or rage, but neither came. Instead, something inside me went dark. Not broken, not shattered, just switched off. There's a strange psychological moment that happens when trust dies. A clean, silent snap in the mind. You stop seeing someone as a partner and start seeing them as a problem. As I sat there in that ballroom holding the biggest award of my career, I looked again at the empty chair beside me, and it hit me with absolute clarity. Jason wasn't my husband anymore. He was a liability. In business, when you realize an asset is depreciating, you don't cling to it out of sentiment. You don't keep investing hope into something that's losing value. You liquidate. I left the event early that night. The trophy sat in the passenger seat while I drove home through quiet November streets. No music, no phone calls. Just the steady hum of the engine and the realization settling into place. When I walked into the house, Jason wasn't there yet. Of course he wasn't. I set the trophy on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. No dramatic confrontation, no accusations. Instead, I opened a blank spreadsheet. I stared at the empty columns for a moment. Then I typed the title at the top, Project Exit. That was the night the plan began. Not with anger, not with revenge, with preparation. Because once you realize someone in your life is no longer a partner, the smartest thing you can do isn't explode. It's start building your way out. That spreadsheet became my quiet little secret. Project Exit. Nothing dramatic about it. Just rows and columns, dates, notes, numbers. But it changed everything. Because once I had that file open in front of me, the situation stopped feeling emotional and started feeling strategic. I didn't confront Jason about the post. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cry or accuse or demand explanations. Instead, I started paying attention, really paying attention. Over the next few weeks, I watched the patterns that had always been there, but that I'd never bothered to examine closely. The late client dinners, the gym sessions that somehow lasted 3 hours, the casual little jokes he liked to make about my business when we were around other people. You play house for a living, he'd laugh sometimes at dinner parties. Meanwhile, I'm out there making real deals. People would chuckle politely, I would smile, and later that night, when the house was quiet, I would open the spreadsheet. Because that's when the game began. Every time Jason belittled my work, I moved money. $500 from our joint, checking into a high-yield trust account I had quietly opened in my name. I called it the tax, not revenge. Just accounting. If he dismissed my career, he paid the tax. If he skipped an event that mattered to me, he paid the tax. If he came home smelling like someone else's perfume, he paid the tax. At first, the transfers were small. 500 here, 1,000 there. Barely noticeable against the flow of everyday expenses. But then something interesting happened. Jason got sloppy. Once you stop believing someone's lies, you start seeing just how many of them there are. There was the networking dinner that cost $1,200, which later appeared on Kayla's Instagram story as a steakhouse date. Tax. There was the time he made a joke to our friends about how my design studio was just an expensive hobby. 5,000. Tax. Sometimes I'd sit at the kitchen island after he went to bed, laptop open quietly, transferring money while the dishwasher hummed in the background. Click. Transfer complete. The numbers in the trust account started climbing, not because I was stealing from him, because I was protecting what I had built. Most of my income came from my design work anyway. Client contracts, consulting fees, licensing deals, money that legally belonged to me. But as long as it flowed through the same shared accounts Jason had access to, it was vulnerable. So I started redirecting it, quietly, systematically, month after month. By the time winter rolled into spring, that trust account had grown into something substantial. Not just a safety net, but a foundation. The strange thing was Jason never noticed, not once, because he had always been better at spending money than understanding where it came from. And the more confident he became in his little double life, the more careless he got with the numbers, which made the final step almost too easy. You see, the goal of Project Exit wasn't just to protect my finances. It was to create leverage, adultery in divorce court. That's messy, but it's common. Lawyers see it every day. But theft? Theft is different. Theft leaves fingerprints. So I made sure there was something tempting enough to take. I left a very specific amount of money sitting in our joint account. Not my full savings. Not even close. Just enough to look like a jackpot to someone greedy and impatient. $68,000. It looked like a renovation fund. The money for my second studio location. And Jason knew that. He had heard me talk about the contractors starting soon, the lease negotiations, the new space I was planning downtown, which meant he knew exactly what that money represented. Opportunity. So I waited. 6 months of quiet preparation, all leading to one moment. Jason thought he was planning an escape. Dubai, investors, Kayla. But I understood something about him that he had never understood about me. Jason was greedy, and greedy people almost always take the bait. So when that alert popped up on my phone in the middle of a client meeting, $68,000 withdrawn, I didn't panic, because that money, that wasn't my life savings. It was the trap. People hear that part of the story, the 68,000 disappearing, and they assume that was the worst moment. The betrayal, the theft. But the truth is, that transfer was exactly what I needed. Because affairs are messy, but they're rarely useful. In divorce court, adultery is mostly background noise. Lawyers sigh, judges nod sympathetically, and then everyone moves on to the numbers. Assets, debts, ownership. Emotion doesn't win cases. Evidence does. That's why the money mattered. If Jason had simply left me for Kayla, we'd be standing in front of a judge arguing over hurt feelings and vague accusations. He would claim we grew apart. I would claim he was unfaithful. And somewhere in the middle, the law would slice everything neatly down the center. 50%. Half the house, half the accounts, half the company I had spent years building. But theft is different. The moment he transferred that $68,000 out of our joint account and ran for the airport, he did more than betray me. He created leverage, a financial paper trail, a confession written in bank records. That's why I needed him to take it. I had spent 6 months quietly building the trap, but traps don't work unless someone is greedy enough to step into them. And Jason had always been greedy. Greedy for shortcuts. Greedy for admiration. Greedy for the fantasy version of success that required none of the discipline. All I had to do was leave the door open and wait for him to walk through it, which he did, right on schedule. While he was probably picturing penthouse suites and investor meetings, the reality was much less glamorous. His transfer was frozen. His cards were revoked. His credit line had just evaporated into thin air. But Jason didn't know any of that yet. Not when he boarded the plane. Not when he landed. And definitely not when he tried to start spending. 7 hours passed. I finished my client meeting, went back to the studio, and settled into the quiet comfort of my office. Italian leather samples spread across the desk, quartz slabs leaning against the wall. Everything exactly where it belonged. The contrast made me smile. Somewhere across the world, chaos was beginning to bloom. Right on cue, my phone lit up. Jason. I watched it ring. Once, twice. I let the first call go to voicemail while I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and dimmed the lights in the studio. No rush, no urgency. Then the phone rang again. This time I picked it up. I didn't say hello. I just held the phone to my ear and listened. On the other end, I could hear the distant hum of an airport terminal. Luggage wheels scraping across tile. A muffled announcement in Arabic echoing through the background. And then Jason's voice exploded into the line. "Eleanor, pick up the damn phone." His words were sharp, frantic, vibrating with a kind of panic I had never heard from him before. The panic of a man discovering that every safety net he thought he had was gone. I held the phone to my ear and waited. "Eleanor, pick up the damn phone." His voice cracked through the line before I even said a word. In the background, I could hear the chaos of an airport terminal, rolling suitcase wheels, rattling over tile, muffled announcements echoing through loudspeakers, dozens of overlapping conversations humming like static. He was exactly where I imagined he'd be. "I'm here, Jason," I said finally. My voice came out flat, calm, almost bored. For a second, he didn't speak, like he was trying to decide whether to yell or beg. Then the panic burst out. "The cards aren't working," he shouted. "None of them. I'm standing at the rental counter right now, and the Visa got declined. Then the Amex got declined. I tried the HELOC card for the deposit, and the guy looked at me like I was some kind of criminal. Behind him, someone spoke rapidly in Arabic. A suitcase thudded against something hard. "They cut the card, Eleanor," he said, his voice rising. The guy literally took scissors and cut the plastic. "That sounds inconvenient," I said. There was a stunned silence. "Inconvenient," he barked. "I'm stranded. I have investors meeting me at the Burj in 2 hours. I can't even pay for a cab to get there." More noise behind him. Now people walking past the hollow echo of the terminal. I pictured him standing there, sweating in his airport clothes, trying to hold on to the illusion that he was still in control. "Fix it," he snapped. "Call the bank. Tell them it's a mistake." I leaned back in my chair, swirling the last of my sparkling water in the glass. "I can't do that, Jason." Another pause. Not confusion this time. Something heavier. Why the hell not? Because it wasn't a mistake. The words settled between us like a weight. For a moment, all I could hear was the distant announcement of a departing flight echoing through the terminal. Then his voice came back lower now, tighter. "What did you do?" "I protected my assets." "What does that even mean?" he demanded. "It means you transferred $68,000 out of our account this morning." He scoffed loudly, trying to shove the panic back down. "That's our money," he said. "Marriage money, renovation money." "Yes," I replied evenly. "The renovation fund, the one you emptied before getting on a plane with your girlfriend." He didn't deny it. Instead, he exploded. "You're overreacting," he shouted. "I was going to pay it back once the investors came through. That money was temporary. Was it? You froze my accounts," he continued, voice climbing again. "You shut off the credit line. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." Another long silence. This one stretched just a little too long. The sound of his breathing filled the line, fast, shallow. "You can't do this. he said finally. "You can't just cut me off like that. I'm your husband." "Not for long." The words slipped out before he could finish. "You think this is funny?" he snapped. "I swear to God, Eleanor, when I get back, I'm going to sue you. I'll take half of that stupid design shop, half of everything." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply listened, because for the first time in 12 years, Jason sounded exactly like what he was. Desperate. "You need to fix this," he said again, weaker now. "Just call the bank and tell them it's an error. I'll send the money back later." I set my glass down on the desk. "Goodbye, Jason." Wait, I hung up. The silence in my studio felt thick and peaceful after the noise of the airport. 3 seconds later, the phone started ringing again. Jason's name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I tapped the screen once and blocked the number. 3 minutes after I blocked Jason's number, the phone rang again. Different name this time. His mother? Of course. I let it ring twice before answering. Old habits. For years, I had been the one smoothing things over in that family, translating Jason's excuses, calming his mother's worries, keeping everyone comfortable. But the moment I put the phone to my ear, the familiar storm arrived. "Eleanor," she screeched. "My son says you cut him off. No greeting, no question, just accusation. He's stranded in a foreign country," she continued, voice climbing higher with every word. "He says none of his cards work. How could you do something so cruel? He's frightened. He has no place to sleep." I listened quietly. In the past, this is where I would have jumped in, explaining everything. The affair, the money, the lies, trying to make her understand why I had done what I did, trying to defend myself, but something had changed. That woman, the one who scrambled to justify herself, didn't exist anymore. I had learned a different strategy. Be boring, be neutral, be a wall. I said. There was a pause on the line, like she'd expected a fight, and instead ran into silence. "Is that all you have to say?" she demanded. "He is your husband." "Not for long," I replied. Her voice sharpened instantly. "You are vindictive," she snapped. Cold. "I always knew you cared more about that business than being a proper wife. You drove him to this." "I see," I said. "He needs money, Eleanor. Send him money right now, or I will tell everyone what you've done." Another pause. "Okay," I said calmly. The word hung there. For a moment, she sounded relieved. "Does that mean you're sending it?" "No," I said. "It means I'm hanging up now." "Don't you dare." Click. I didn't just end the call. I powered the phone down completely. The screen went black in my hand, and suddenly the room was silent. For years, I had managed their emotions, absorbed their chaos, cleaned up their messes. Today, I let them sit in it. Jason was in Dubai with no money, a girlfriend who was probably starting to ask uncomfortable questions, and a mother who couldn't fix it for him. I placed the phone on the sofa cushion beside me and leaned back. For the first time all day, the quiet felt like power. Jason came back 48 hours later. Not to the house. He couldn't. I had changed the locks and the alarm codes the hour his flight took off. By the time his plane touched down back in the States, the place he once called home had already closed its doors to him. From what I heard later, he ended up at his mother's house. The same guest room he slept in during college breaks, still lined with dusty trophies from high school track meets. It didn't take long for the next move. 2 days after he landed, an envelope arrived. His lawyer. The letter inside was almost impressive in its audacity. A perfectly polished demand filled with confident legal language, as if rewriting reality might somehow make it true. Jason wanted spousal support. He wanted reinstatement into the marital home. And most offensively, he wanted 50% ownership of our interiors. According to the letter, his emotional support and financial guidance had played a critical role in building my company. Therefore, he was entitled to half its value. I read the document sitting across from my attorney Julia in her office. Mahogany desk, soft lamplight, the faint scent of paper and lemon polish. When I finished the last line, I looked up at her. She looked back at me, and slowly, we both smiled. Not out of cruelty, out of recognition, because Jason had just made a very big mistake. Discovery is going to be interesting, Julia said calmly. Discovery is the phase where both sides have to open the books, bank records, applications, financial history. Every document connected to the marriage gets combed through. Jason thought he was starting a fight over assets. What he didn't realize was that the paperwork he'd buried months earlier was about to surface. Julia had spent the last few days going through our financial records with the patience of a forensic accountant, line by line, signature by signature, and then she found it. A loan application submitted to the bank 3 days before Jason left for Dubai. He had requested an increase to our home equity line of credit from $200,000 to $350,000. The application had already been approved. Julia slid the document across the desk toward me. At the bottom were 2 signatures, Jason's and mine, except mine wasn't mine. Look closely, Julia said. I leaned forward. See the E in Eleanor? I nodded. You always loop your E, she continued, pointing at the ink. Smooth curve, consistent stroke. Then she tapped the signature on the application. This one is jagged, hesitant. It's a trace. My finger hovered over the paper. Jason had forged my name, not on some harmless form, on a bank document that secured $150,000 of additional debt against my house. Suddenly, the room felt very quiet. Julia leaned back in her chair. In divorce court, she said carefully, affairs are unfortunate. Financial arguments are common. She tapped the document once, but bank fraud forgery on a federal lending document. She gave me a slow, satisfied look. That's not divorce drama, Eleanor. That's a felony. As if the forgery wasn't enough, there was one more detail buried inside Jason's lawyer's letter that almost made me laugh out loud. Right in the middle of his demands, he had added a tragic little story about lost income. According to him, my freezing of the marital assets had caused him to miss a critical investment meeting in Dubai, one that would have earned him a 6-figure commission. The investor's name was listed right there in the complaint. Arthur Henderson. I remember blinking at the page for a second before leaning back in my chair. Julia noticed immediately what she asked. Arthur Henderson, I said slowly. Yes, she replied. Why? I couldn't help it. I actually laughed, because Arthur Henderson wasn't just some random investor. Arthur Henderson was the husband of Beatrix Henderson, and Beatrix Henderson happened to be one of my biggest clients. The woman whose living room I had redesigned just weeks earlier. The woman I had dinner with the night before. Jason left for Dubai listening to her rave about the new quartz fireplace installation. Jason had flown halfway across the world to pitch a man whose wife was currently recommending my firm to her friends. He had no idea. Julia raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Completely. That little coincidence turned out to matter a lot more than Jason realized. Because when Arthur Henderson eventually learned why Jason had missed their meeting about the frozen cards, the stolen marital funds, the forged loan documents, his reaction was immediate. An email. Short, direct, devastating. Not only was he declining the meeting, he was terminating every current and future contract his company had with Jason's firm. He made it very clear why. He didn't do business with people who lacked basic integrity. Just like that, Jason's carefully crafted professional image collapsed under the weight of his own decisions. He liked to say I destroyed his career, but the truth was much simpler. Jason did that all by himself. All I did was make sure the truth reached the right people. The arbitration room smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive carpet. Jason was already there when Julia and I walked in. He was wearing his closer suit, the navy pinstripe one I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. It pulled a little tighter around his waist now, but he still wore it like armor. Like the man who walked into that room expected to walk out with a check. He smirked when he saw me. Actually smirked, Eleanor, he said, with a small nod, like we were colleagues meeting over coffee. Ready to settle this so we can all move on? I didn't answer. I simply took my seat beside Julia. Across the table, Jason's lawyer began shuffling his papers. We're prepared to offer a 50-50 split of the marital assets, he said smoothly, including the current valuation of our interiors. My client is willing to waive spousal support in exchange for a lump sum buyout of his equity. Jason leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the table. Confident? Certain. He really believed he was about to leave with $500,000. Julia didn't argue. She didn't even open her briefcase. Instead, she slid a thin black folder across the polished table. We have a counteroffer, she said. Jason's lawyer opened the folder. I watched his eyes move across the first page, then the second. His posture changed instantly. The relaxed boredom vanished. His back straightened, shoulders tightening as if someone had just whispered the word bomb. What is this? Jason asked, reaching for the folder. That I said calmly is a forensic handwriting analysis, confirming the signature on the HELOC expansion application is a forgery. He froze. Bank fraud carries a federal sentence of up to 30 years, I continued. Jason's face drained of color. That's a mistake, he stammered. I had permission. Implied permission. Julia flipped to the second page, and underneath that, she said, is an email from Arthur Henderson. Jason grabbed the paper hands, already starting to shake. His eyes moved across the paragraph. The color drained even further. You got me fired, he whispered. No, Jason, I said quietly. You got yourself fired. I just made sure the truth got there. The room went silent. Jason's lawyer closed the folder slowly and pushed it back toward us. I can't defend this, he muttered. Julia folded her hands. Here's our offer, she said. You signed the quitclaim deed on the house today. You waive all claims to our interiors and any future earnings. You assume 100% of the debt you created. She paused. And in exchange, Eleanor agrees not to send this folder to the FBI. Jason stared at the pen in front of him. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. 6 months have passed since that day in the arbitration room. The house feels different now. The first thing I did after the deed officially transferred into my name was hire a painter. The dull, corporate beige Jason insisted on better. For resale value, he used to say disappeared under a deep emerald green. I replaced his bulky leather recliner with a velvet chaise lounge by the window. The house doesn't feel empty. It feels like it finally exhaled. I don't hear from Jason anymore, but news travels. Through mutual acquaintances and through his mother's dramatic Facebook posts. He's back in his childhood bedroom working an entry-level sales job calling strangers to sell insurance. Kayla didn't last long either. She disappeared about 3 weeks after Dubai. This morning, I opened the trust account that once carried a simple label tax. I deleted the word and typed a new one. Expansion fund. Tomorrow, I signed the lease for our interior's second location. For a long time, I thought love meant holding the structure together while someone else kept swinging the hammer. Fix the cracks, balance the damage, pretend the foundation was still strong. But now I understand something different. I'm not the fixer anymore. I'm the architect. And when you're the architect, you get to decide what stays and what gets demolished. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from someone else's mess, I'd love to hear your story. And if this one stayed with you, stick around, there are more conversations like this ahead.